On October 23, 2025, June Lockhart, the last surviving adult star of Lost in Space, passed away at the age of 100. Before she left, she had said things in her final interviews that the network never wanted public. Today, we are going inside the Jupiter 2 and pulling out every secret buried for 60 years. These people carried stories their whole lives. And now, finally, every single one of them can be told. The final survivor's shocking revelation. There is something about outliving nearly everyone you work with that makes a person stop protecting a story. When the cameras are rolling for what might be the last time, you stop choosing your words carefully and you just tell the truth. That is exactly what happened in the final years of the Lost in Space cast. By 2025, only 3 members of the original Robinson family were still alive. Bill Mumy, who played the boy genius Will Robinson from age 10 to 14, turned 72. Angela Cartwright, his television sister Penny, turned 73. Marta Kristen, the eldest daughter Judy, reached 81. And before June Lockhart, the mother of the family, died peacefully in Santa Monica on October 23, 2025, she had already been speaking more freely than at any point in the previous 6 decades. In her final interviews, Lockhart described what it actually felt like to learn that Lost in Space had been canceled. She did not receive a phone call. She did not sit with a producer who thanked her for 3 years of work. She read it in a small notice in the entertainment section of her morning newspaper. That was the entirety of the farewell CBS offered to the cast of one of the most watched science fiction shows in American television history. Lockhart was not the only one who carried that wound. Bill Mumy, who was 14 years old when the show ended, told interviewers decades later that he cried when his agent called him with the news. He described filming the last season with the complete belief that a 4th season was already arranged. Then the renewal list appeared, and the Jupiter 2 was not on it. He went home and wept. A 14-year-old boy, ending a chapter that had consumed his entire childhood, learning it was over from someone who had to deliver the news over a telephone. What makes this even more striking is that by the time these final revelations came out, Mark Goddard, who had played the rugged pilot Don West, had already died of pulmonary fibrosis on October 10, 2023, at the age of 87. Jonathan Harris, the irreplaceable Dr. Smith, had passed away on November 3, 2002. Bob May, the man who climbed inside the robot suit every single day for 3 years, had died in January 2009. Dick Tufeld, who was the robot's voice, followed in January 2012. And yet the 3 Robinson children who remain are still finding each other. On March 17, 2026, Bill Mumy posted a photograph of himself standing with Angela Cartwright and Marta Kristen and captioned it, "Judy, Penny, and Will Robinson, spotted on Earth yesterday." 60 years after the show first aired, they are still showing up for one another. That single fact tells you something important about what this show really was, underneath the foam rubber aliens and the spray-painted props. But here is what nobody outside their circle knew for decades. The cast that survived stayed loyal to each other for 60 years. The man who was supposed to die early ended up controlling the entire show, and he did it so brilliantly that even the people he outmaneuvered eventually admitted it was a masterpiece. Jonathan Harris rewrote his own character and stole the series before Jonathan Harris was Dr. Smith. He was a pharmacist's son from a 6-story tenement building in the Bronx who had literally invented himself from scratch. His parents were Russian immigrants. His father worked in Manhattan's garment district. The boy who grew up speaking what he later described as thick Bronx street slang made a decision early in his life that he was going to become someone else entirely. He changed his surname from Karasukin to Harris at 17, against his father's furious objections. He changed his surname at 17, earned a pharmacy degree he never used, fabricated an acting resume, and talked his way into a career that would eventually include Broadway, The Twilight Zone, and roughly 125 stage productions. When Irwin Allen offered him the role on Lost in Space, Harris looked at the character as written and immediately recognized a career trap. Smith was a cold-blooded spy who killed a guard in the pilot's opening minutes and reprogrammed a robot to kill the Robinson family in their sleep. He was designed to be despicable and eliminated within 5 episodes. Harris understood exactly what this meant. A role that ends in 5 episodes is not a career. It is an expensive dead end. So he started rewriting things. quietly at first. He would arrive on set with entirely new pages of dialogue written overnight. He told the cast, "Let's go over the scene. I have changed all the dialogue." Bill Mumy, still a child at the time, watched this and later described it with genuine awe. Harris would rewrite scenes and then quietly engineer every beat of the action so that all roads led back to Smith. The cowardly eye rolls, the melodramatic wailing about his back, and most importantly the cascade of invented insults hurled at the robot. None of it appeared in any script. Harris sat up nights constructing phrases like bubble-headed booby, nickel-plated nincompoop, and bellicose bumpkin. He explained his reasoning with perfect logic. The robot was wise to Smith's schemes, and Smith had to attack it instantly to keep it from exposing him. Every insult was a survival tactic dressed as comedy. By the time Irwin Allen understood what had happened, 500 fan letters a month were pouring in for Dr. Smith. Allen had no realistic choice but to celebrate it. He later said openly, "Smith was not originally created as a comedy character, but Jonathan Harris dictated what we should do with the character." Harris negotiated a special guest star credit on every one of all 83 episodes, reportedly the first time that billing structure had appeared on American television. But Allen's public praise concealed a private discomfort, because the actor he had hired to be his leading hero was watching his entire role dissolve in front of him, and there was nothing either of them could do about it anymore. Guy Williams in The Slow Erasure of a Man Born. To lead Guy Williams came to Lost in Space as one of the most recognizable men on American television. For years, as Zorro on Disney had made him a genuine star, and the show's merchandise had generated $11 million within months of its premiere. He was tall, fencing trained since age 7, and genuinely excited about playing John Robinson, the brilliant mission commander who would lead his family through the universe. This was supposed to be his show. The transformation happened gradually enough to feel almost polite. In Season 1, Williams' screen time began shrinking as the Dr. Smith storylines expanded. By Season 2, it was a pattern. By Season 3, it was simply the reality of production. Williams appeared on set, delivered a handful of lines, and stood in the background while Jonathan Harris and Bill Mumy and the robot carried the episode forward. Mark Goddard described the atmosphere directly. The show started going more toward the robot and Smith, and there were hard feelings from Guy especially. Jonathan Harris himself acknowledged the damage, which is remarkable given that he was the cause of it. He said openly that Williams was hired to be the star of the piece and ended up with an occasional line every other week. Harris called this very difficult for an actor to endure. He was correct. He just did not stop doing it. Williams filled his idle hours listening to classical music, reading astronomy, playing chess, and buying stocks. Bill Mumy gave him the nickname The Comb because Williams groomed himself constantly between takes, a man turning restless energy into something harmless. In one reported exchange with Harris, Williams erupted with the words, "God damn it, I will kill you, Harris," before adding after pause, "I mean Smith," whether accidental or deliberate. It captured something completely real about the situation. After cancellation, Williams discovered his Hollywood career had not survived being the background of his own show. Then he found that halfway around the world, his situation was entirely reversed. Zorro had become a cultural institution in Argentina. The government gave him a luxury marina apartment. The wife of President Perón personally invited him to perform at a charity event. He spent the last 21 years of his life living as something close to royalty in a country that had never forgotten what he meant to them. On May 6, 1989, police entered his Buenos Aires apartment after friends reported his disappearance and found him alone. A ruptured brain aneurysm had killed him approximately a week earlier. He was 65. Nobody had known because he had been living alone, and mobile phones did not yet exist. The man promised the lead of a television series had died undiscovered, a week before anyone found him, in a country that loved him more than his own industry ever had. Bill Mumy later said simply, when the show ended, he never saw Guy again, not once. The leading man died alone on the other side of the world. Back on the studio lot where the show had been filmed, another cast member had spent 3 years enduring something far more physically dangerous, and the production company had decided it was not a problem worth solving. Bob May, the robot suit, and 3 years of invisible suffering, every child who watched Lost in Space in the 1960s loved the robot. It waved its accordion arms, barked warnings, and somehow managed to feel warm despite being made entirely of metal and rubber. For 3 years, the person physically inside that machine was suffering in ways the production company had quietly decided were not anyone else's concern. Bob May walked into the Lost in Space audition by accident while applying for a different job at 20th Century Fox. Irwin Allen's team sent him to try on the robot suit. The audition was brutally simple. If you fit, you are hired. When May climbed out of the suit after his first session inside, he was cut and bleeding from the metal edges. He took the job anyway. The suit weighed approximately 200 pounds. Under studio lights, the interior temperature became what May later described as his own jacuzzi and sauna combined. The costume was nearly airtight. On at least 2 confirmed occasions across the 3 seasons, May passed out inside it from lack of oxygen. His eyes rolled back, and he went limp before crew members realized something was wrong. The production company's official response to these incidents was that there was no time to stop filming. May was a devoted smoker who puffed cigarettes inside the costume during breaks between takes. June Lockhart recalled seeing smoke drifting through the robot's seams and finding it quietly amusing. The legend involves Irwin Allen arriving between scenes, spotting smoke rising from the apparently empty robot, and panicking that the suit was on fire. When he discovered it was May enjoying a cigarette, Allen reportedly decreed that whenever a script called for the robot to emit smoke, May should personally generate it. Despite performing every physical gesture that made the robot one of television's most beloved characters, Bob May was never credited on screen during the entire original run. Not one episode in all 3 seasons carried his name. The practical consequence was lower pay and significantly reduced residuals. As Lost in Space grew into a global phenomenon, generating licensing income across decades, May and his wife Judith were living in a mobile home park in the San Fernando Valley. In November 2008, the Sayre fire destroyed their home. 2 months later, May died of congestive heart failure at 69. What defined his later years was not bitterness, but extraordinary generosity. He became one of the most beloved figures on the science fiction convention circuit, staying at signing tables until every fan had their moment, no matter how long it took. He said once, "I will stay at any convention signing autographs until the last fan is finished or the cleaning crew forces me to leave." A man made invisible by the industry that profited from him chose to make sure that no fan ever felt invisible in front of him. The robot smiled for 60 years of reruns and never once showed what was happening inside. The show itself worked the same way. Before any of those cameras rolled, Irwin Allen had tried to make something completely different, and the network had buried it before it could breathe. The $600,000 pilot and the compromise that changed everything before there was a robot, before there was a Dr. Smith, before there was a single foam rubber alien or a catchphrase about pain. There was a 60-minute film that Irwin Allen believed was the best work of his career. He was wrong about many things over the years, but on this point he was probably right. The original Lost in Space pilot, titled No Place to Hide, was filmed in late 1964 on a budget of approximately $600,000, which made it the most expensive television pilot ever produced at that time. The cinematographer had won 3 Academy Awards. The special effects supervisor was a future Oscar winner. The writer later contributed scripts to Star Trek. Allen financed it with backing from CBS, 20th Century Fox, Red Skelton, and Groucho Marx. The story was clean and entirely serious. A family called the Robinsons launched toward Alpha Centauri, were knocked off course by a meteor storm, and landed on an alien planet where they had survived. Both Robinson parents held doctorates. The children were prodigies. There was no villain, no comedy, no robot, no internal conflict. It played like a genuine film. Will Robinson sat around a campfire and sang Greensleeves. It was a survival story about brilliant people facing a frightening situation with intelligence and cooperation. When Allen screened it for CBS executives, he expected professional silence. Instead, they laughed with delight and bought the series immediately. Then they handed him a list of demands. The pilot was too hardware-driven. They wanted a recurring antagonist who could generate weekly conflict without requiring new threats from scratch. Allen suggested Ming the Merciless. His story editor pushed for something closer to Long John Silver. They settled on Dr. Zachary Smith. CBS also required a robot. The ship was redesigned, and the original Sirius pilot was locked in a storage vault. Approximately 80% of that original footage was eventually cut up and inserted into the first 5 episodes of Season 1. Dr. Smith and the robot were conveniently written as having stayed behind at the ship in each of those episodes, explaining their absence from footage that predated their existence by almost a year. The show premiered on September 15, 1965. 2 important facts rarely mentioned. The Jupiter 2 interior set cost $350,000, making it the most expensive standing television set of its era, more costly than the entire Enterprise bridge on Star Trek. And the theme music was composed by a 24-year-old named Johnny Williams, who later became John Williams and wrote the scores for Star Wars, Jaws, and Indiana Jones. The Sirius vision was replaced with something the network could sell, and for 2 seasons it worked brilliantly. But ratings can hide the truth that only the people on set can see, and behind the cameras 2 of the most famous science fiction franchises in American history were conducting a war that neither side ever fully admitted to. Star Trek, Borrowed Ears, A Secret Engagement, and the fan and the enemy camp. The rivalry between Lost in Space and Star Trek is one of the most misunderstood